Hello, everyone. I'm Jeremy Neilson, co-founder and CEO of Assure, and this is What's Going On in Venture. Today, we're talking with Gabriel Jarrosson, founder of Leonis Investments. Gabriel is passionate about entrepreneurship and investments. He created his first website at the age of 13 and sold his first startup at 25. Since then, he acts as an angel investor and founder of Leonis Investment, a private club that offers its French members investment opportunities in high-growth startups in Silicon Valley. In 2019, Gabriel released the book, My Investor's Secrets, published by the renowned publishing house Maxima Editions, with a preface by Xavier Niel, French billionaire and founder of 42 coding schools and Station F, biggest startup incubator in the world. Gabriel, welcome to What's Going On in Venture. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy, and I'm really happy to be here.
Let's begin by talking about Leonis. You call it a club. Tell us more about it.
Sure. So Leonis is actually an angel syndicate, as you guys have a lot of in the US. Actually, in France, there were none when I created it. So I kind of gave it another name, because syndicate in French is the unions, when people unionize. So it's different. So I had to give it a name. I thought the concept of a club was nice and a group of people sharing a similar interest into investing. But it's really an angel syndicate. The difference is that the investors are French, but we're looking to invest into US startups, and most of them, of course, that we look at are in Silicon Valley.
So these members, how did you find them, and why are they interested in participating in these syndicates that you put together?
Wow, there's a lot of levels to answer you, but to make it really a short story, I started investing on my own. I used, I used the crowdfunding, crowd equity websites in France. I invested in French startups, and I really wanted to invest in, let's say, the best startups. So I thought to myself, where are they? Well, obviously, many of them, not all of them, but many of them are in the US. But then when I, started to reach out to the startups, I was very, very small investor. And I said, yeah, I'd love to invest in your company. And they said, sure, we'd love to have you. But if you want to invest with us, you're going to have to put down, maybe $100,000, maybe even like $50,000. And I was a very, very small investor. So then at some point I realized, well, maybe we can, group people. There were people interested in what I was doing. They saw my initial investments. I was doing quite well. So they kind of reached out to me and said, well, could we invest with you? And I, had kind of an epiphany. I said, well, there's people wanting to invest with me. I don't have enough money to invest on my own. So, let's join forces and do it together. And the funny part is right now, to grow the club and to allow new investors to find me, I actually have the biggest French YouTube channel about startup investing, which is how now new investors are finding me.
So how'd they find you originally? You said that they were hearing about the deals that you had done. How were they finding out about the investing that you were doing?
Oh, at the very beginning, it was mostly friends and, let's say, my LinkedIn network. So as soon as I started investing, I was extremely young and extremely proud of being able to invest, in those deals. So I was really bragging on LinkedIn. I was like, oh, I'm an investor there. But then the bragging came to a point where I started having a few exits, which of course I bragged about again. And so then, a few people, were probably scrolling through LinkedIn and realized it, and a few friends, and reached out. It started as like maybe 5 to 10 people, which is crazy that today we're almost 300 investors.
So how long has that taken for you? Many times to get to an exit can be a long time. Did you have some early exits, or have you been doing this a long time?
I started investing on my own in 2013, so it's been almost 8 years already. So it's been a while, but I was lucky enough to have very, very short exits and very early exits. The shortest one I think was 3 months, which was insane. I invested in June before the summer, and in September the company got acquired. I made a decent multiple too, so it was quite a good use of my money, and I've been fortunate enough to make, I think, 5 or 6 exits so far. So yeah, after 2 years, we were only roughly 100 in the club, and then 2020 and COVID hit. And I mean, I'm happy to discuss it further, but there were a lot of people looking to invest their money in a smart way, and so now today we're 300 investors.
So when did you start the YouTube channel?
That was about 3 years ago, same as the club. And also, with YouTube, with the social media, there's really kind of an exponential curve. So same story. After a year, I had, I don't know, a few dozens of subscribers. And today it's not huge, but it's 16,000 if I'm correct, which makes for some of them converting into investors.
So what's the topic? Tell us more about this YouTube channel. How often do you post? What kind of content do you post? How do you come up with your content?
Well, it changed over the time, but when I started, I wanted to create a YouTube channel about investing in general. So I had 5 topics. The biggest one for me was startups, which is really my passion and what I do today. But I also talked about investing in the stock market, investing in real estate, investing in the cryptocurrencies, and investing into creating your own business. So what's kind of crazy when I think about it is for the first 2 years of the channel, I posted 1 video every single day, which was a crazy amount of work for me. But since I had so many topics that I wanted to talk about, and this actually allowed me to, kind of jumpstart the channel and reach velocity after 2 years. But it was a huge amount of work. And now I'm publishing, it really depends, but let's say 3 to 4 videos per week, which is still quite a rhythm.
Is there a certain of those 5? Is there a certain one that you got more interest on, or is it kind of equal interest per those 5 topics?
So now I only talk about startup investing on the channel because there's a lot of people talking about the other topics, real estate and stock market. There's so many people, but in France, there's not that many people talking about startup investing. So I really want to be kind of the reference. I was lucky in a sense that in 2017, there was the huge kind of crypto boom. Everyone was talking about crypto. Bitcoin reached $19,000 and everyone was talking about it. So I kind of surfed on that wave that allowed me just to grow my subscriber base, which still are subscribed today. But now I only talk about startups. So some of them discovered me with Bitcoin, let's say, but now they really want to invest. It's kind of similar too, because it's like a very risky investment, but that could potentially bring you a lot of returns. So yeah.
Did you do investments into crypto assets?
Absolutely, yeah. Luckily for me, before kind of the wave and the hype, but yeah, I did.
So what's your quick assessment of crypto? Is it kind of dead and gone? Is it just hibernating? Is it still very vibrant and people just aren't following the right groups?
I think hibernating is a very good description of what's happening. I'm an engineer originally, so when you understand the technology, you have to know that it has great potential and a great future. There's a saying that says we always underestimate the power of the technology change that's going to happen, but we always overestimate the timing. So we always think it's going to happen like tomorrow, but we don't actually understand the depth of the changes. And I think this really applies to crypto and blockchain. I think it's going to probably take another 10 years, but I do think that the technology and the fundamentals are there. And Bitcoin in particular, we've seen with COVID since the beginning of the year, hundreds of billions and I don't know, trillions or whatever of dollars and euros. Actually, the euro bonds, I think it's today or yesterday that it was approved. So there's this huge money creation, and that's extremely, extremely interesting and positive for Bitcoin, I think.
So let's talk about the kind of the members. So they're French, and are you investing in just Silicon Valley companies, or are you investing in French or other jurisdictions?
So originally, I started investing only in France because this is the only access that I had, and I really wanted to invest in the US. So there was a bunch of challenges. Let's say there were 2 big challenges actually. The first one was the deal flow. So I traveled and went there and spent a lot of time and tried to create my network, which was not easy. It took some time. And obviously, and I really want to mention it because you're a big part of the solution, was the aspect of how to make the SPV. If we could invest with a French SPV in the US, it was quite complicated. And as you know, Assure was a big part in solving that for me. And it was actually crazy the amount of stress and mental charge and headaches that it just made disappear for me. The minute I started with the show, I was like, oh my God, this is just like done and I can focus on the deal flow. The deal flow might be more complicated, but the administrative stuff was terrible. So I just focus on the deal flow now. And to answer your question, now I mostly invest in Silicon Valley because I'm lucky enough to have a lot of deal flow there, access to a lot of startups. So I still have a lot of French opportunities, but my view is I'm happy to invest in France when I think the potential is the same. Sadly, it's rarely the case with all of the great deals that I see in the US. So, and I want to mention it's not only in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is one thing, but there's other companies, and we invest in different areas of the US. But many of them are there, obviously, as you know.
So tell us more about the difference you're seeing between a French company and a U.S. company. Why do you think that you're finding in kind of your assessment the higher quality companies in America? Do you have kind of a reason you think that is?
Yes. So absolutely. It's something I think about a lot, and it's something people ask me about a lot. I have to start by saying that I think that the French ecosystem is really progressing quite fast and really heading in the right direction. And I think in maybe 10 years or something, it could kind of rival Silicon Valley. And as you know, people are kind of also leaving Silicon Valley to be in Austin and to be remote and to be blah, blah, blah. So I think really Paris is probably one of the most interesting places to be in right now in Europe. That being said, Silicon Valley has such a head start. And as an investor, I'm really looking at something that I call unfair advantage, which a lot of people are looking for in a startup. So an unfair advantage is what is it that makes that this startup, this company is going to succeed and not the competitors or not someone else? What is it about the founders? What is it about a lot of stuff? And to me, being in Silicon Valley is in itself an unfair advantage. I do think that for a number of reasons, what I really see as a difference is, first of all, the access of capital. It is huge, and you probably know the stat that 25% of the startup funding worldwide happens in Silicon Valley, which is insane to me. But that's one thing, and it allows company to grow so big and to raise so much money. And in France, it's a big problem once you want to raise a couple dozen of millions is fine, but once you want to raise $100 million or euros, you can't in France. So that's kind of an issue, obviously, to grow. That's one thing. Then you have so many talents. Everyone in the world kind of dreams of going in California, and not that many people dream of coming to work in Paris, even though it's a great place. But people just dream about California. The weather is better for sure. So that's one thing. You have an ecosystem of talented and really ambitious founders and mentors and everything. So I really think the ecosystem is better. One thing I also want to mention is that French founders really used to lack international ambition. That's also getting better. So it's not all the way there, but it's really getting better now. But still, some founders release their product only in French, which is a big market online when you take the global population. But the African French-speaking countries are not the same market, not as mature as the French one. It's really different. So yeah, there's a lot of difference. I could talk about this for hours. Yeah.
You mentioned that it's difficult for a French company to raise large rounds. Why is that? Is it that they don't have venture capitalists there, or is it restrictions from the government? Why is it?
No, actually, the reason is very simple. There's not so many, but it's also because of the ecosystem has been here for so long. There's so many people that have made so many huge exits for the past 20, 30 years with technology companies. In France, we're not there yet. As I mentioned, as I said, I think it's really going in that direction, but it's just not there yet. And you actually see it, French companies that have very, very big rounds of over $100 million all the time, they go raise the money in the US or at least abroad.
So you kind of mentioned that individuals, groups, companies are leaving Silicon Valley for one reason or another. I think a lot of it may be the pandemic, the remote working. You kind of cited Austin, other cities in the U.S. and France, that we're catching up or getting closer. Can these other cities in other countries ever catch Silicon Valley? Is the COVID pandemic making that possible? Because you say like in 10 years they're there, but does Silicon Valley be that much further ahead again? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's a very good question, and I'm really not sure. And especially, I don't live in Silicon Valley. It's almost my second house, but I haven't been since February. I miss it. But you read a lot of stuff that says what you just said. You read a lot of stuff of people saying Silicon Valley is dead, it's finished, blah blah blah. Personally, I don't think so. And the reason why I do not think that Silicon Valley is dead is because I see actually so many companies just being in Silicon Valley just for the raise. And I'm a very good example of that. My investors are French. I'm French. I live in Paris. And still, I'm going all the way to Silicon Valley all the time to find startups. But I also see it the other way around. I see so many investors that I ask them, where are you located? And they tell me, well, actually, our office is in wherever, any other state in the US, and they tell me it's great. We have a cheaper rent. We have cheaper workforce. But I come here every week to raise money. And this is what I see all the time. And it's just, the kind of the first mover advantage, or it's the place to be if you want to raise money or if you want to invest money, for me. So I think it will probably keep its place as at least a hub. Maybe the employees and the companies in themselves are going to move somewhere else. And I mean, everything is remote nowadays, or anyway, right? But the place is still going to be Silicon Valley, I think. Yeah.
So do you have any investors in your network that are non-French, and is that on purpose, or would you add non-French investors to your club?
Well, not really. The reason being, not today. The reason being, my YouTube channel is in French, and so people kind of finding out about me. I have a very it's called inbound marketing, I think, right? So I put out content, and people kind of find out about me and then join. Since I put out videos in French, people finding out about me are French. Maybe they could be Canadian French, but most of the time they're French. I do have an English syndicate on a platform famous for hosting syndicates. It is small and growing. I don't put that much energy on growing it. I think I do it because it might help me source great deals that I could then invest into from both the English and the French one. But 99% of my time of my investors are in the French one. It's actually something that I'm considering. I don't know what I'm going to do next. The fun part is, if I create a second one, might not be for English speaking. I was thinking of doing one for Chinese speaking people, because for the average American, it's relatively easier to find US deals. They live there, they speak the language. But for Chinese people, and there's many, many more of them, it's super hard for them to access my kind of unfair advantages. I allow people to access Silicon Valley deals, even if they're not there. So I don't speak Chinese. I don't live in China. I've lived in Shanghai for 2 years, which is why I have that on my mind. I have no idea if I'll ever do that, but it's something that I've thought about sometimes.
Yeah. So what percentage of your investors are coming from the educational content you're producing, and how much are they coming from a buddy is in the network already and talking about, oh, I just did this great deal with Leonis? What percentage do you think is coming from the actual educational content?
That's the beauty of it. I really thought that there was going to be kind of a word of mouth, like people referring to friends or family members of actually the referral is really low. And I'm kind of surprised. I was kind of surprised by the low referral, but when you think about it, the French
Gabriel,
mentality of investing is extreme.
Your internet went out. So
sorry. Am I back?
You're back. Can you go back? And you said
cool. Yeah, absolutely.
You thought it would come from family and friends, and then it.
Yeah. So to my surprise, it didn't. I think the big difference is that the French investor is much more risk averse than the US investor. To give you an example, 30 to 35% of Americans invest in the stock market. In France, it's only 7%. People are super risk averse. They don't want their portfolio to go down 5 or 10%. And so startup investing is even riskier, And so most 99% of French people would never do that kind of investment. And I think that's the reason why people don't kind of recommend it to their friends or peers or whatever, because when people talk about it, like the people on the receiving end of the information, like, oh, good for you, but I would never do that. It's too risky. And so to answer your question, I think that at least 95% of my investors come from the educational content and come from the YouTube channel, which is insane. Like when I think about it, YouTube allowed me to create a huge investment club that's almost the equivalent of a small fund just from YouTube. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. So do you have a minimum that you require or kind of list? And then, what was the decision process behind that number?
Absolutely. That's a very good question. I do have a minimum and it's extremely low. It's 2,000 euros, which is $2,200. The idea behind it is that I want a maximum, the biggest number of people possible to be able to invest in the deals, even with small amounts. So what's interesting is that most of my investors, they're not professional investors. They didn't do it before. They have capital. They don't necessarily have a lot of capital. They, of course, want to invest whatever. Some of them invest much, much more money. But I really wanted to make it accessible with the smallest amount possible, because when I started out, that's the amount that I was comfortable investing in the companies. And that was a long time ago, but still I kind of want to keep that vision. And if people, as I said, they're not comfortable with the risk, so they want to invest a very small amount of money even for them, that I wanted that to be fine for me. Of course, the big issue with that is that I ended up with a lot of investors with very small checks, and it was the problem of managing that. And this is once again where Assure came in, as I mentioned earlier, is that if I was on my own without a tool like Glassboard and Assure, I'm sure I would have raised the minimum and be like, if you don't invest 5, 10, maybe $25,000, I'm not going to spend the time and deal with one by one. But since it's automated for me, I actually don't really care in a sense. And I can allow them with a very, very small amount, which some of them, not all of them, but some of them, take profit from and are very happy about.
Have you seen any increase of the minimum as people get kind of just the average, right? So maybe everybody that starts with you is hitting the minimum of 2,000 euro that is kind of required. Do you see that number tick up, or are people kind of really hovering around that 2,000 euro number?
It really depends. Some people, yes, do increase. They see a few things, and we've actually made our very first exit inside the club. So some people are like extremely happy right now and want to reinvest. So I've seen that. What I've also seen is people telling me like, oh, I only want to invest like in maybe 3 to 5 deals in the next 2 years, which is kind of a small amount. My personal rhythm is kind of around 10 deals per year. I don't, know in advance, but when I see a very cool deal, I do it. So it's around 10 deals per year. And I do see a tendency of people investing in many more deals because they see the deal and they kind of can't resist, which I think is a very good compliment. They tell me like, wow, this is so cool. I didn't want to invest anymore, but I'm just going to, I'm going to do it anyway, which I think is awesome. They enjoy the content that I'm providing.
What do you provide to them? Do you put together like a due diligence package? Are you doing something on your YouTube channel? Tell us how you tell your group about these opportunities.
Absolutely. So not most of the time, 100% of the time so far, we've been followers in the funding round. So I've had the kind of luxury of having a due diligence that's already done for me, which saves me time and money. So I usually, just, kind of piggyback on the existing due diligence that someone else did before me, the lead investor in the round, because we haven't led any round. We might start leading rounds now that we're investing a bigger amount. So then I just write, a deal memo. It's like maybe a 1-pager, 2-pager about the deal, what I like about it, why I'm excited. And also I have a very strict list of investment criteria that I use all the time on my YouTube channel and everything. So I, go through the list and see if everything checks out. And this is what I send. So I don't do a YouTube video about it because then it would be public and it's reserved for the members of the club.
And so do you just email this out? Do you do a call, a Zoom call?
No, I'm a big believer in automation and, group dynamics. So I send, to everyone an email, a bunch of emails actually with reminders. We have a Slack channel where we all kind of are grouped and communicate and we can talk about the deal and everything. And then, with the founder that we're investing with, I organize a Zoom call, kind of a webinar where they can actually come ask their question to the founder and he can answer live. And the funny twist is that some of my group members, some of the members of my club and investors don't speak English that well. French are famous for their terrible English. So I actually have the webinar in real time interpreted in French so people can choose, like they can either follow it in English or they can follow it in French, ask their question in French. I will then translate it and ask it in English, and they'll have the answer interpreted back to them. It's a whole logistic thing, but it's a fun twist.
Yeah, well, it's fun. Let's talk about COVID a little bit. You mentioned it earlier. What did you see happen with deal flow and your network of individuals? What was there a change? Did you see a change, and what was that change?
Yes, there was a lot of changes. Let me tell you what happened. So first of all, in the existing members of the club, I offered, I made a deal happen in March, at the beginning of everyone in France was confined, one in April and one in May when things were getting better. So in March, when I did the deal, a lot of people inside the club, they said, they passed on the deal. They said, no thanks. They said, we're in cash preservation mode. We're going to wait it out, see what happens. So there was a significant, it was lower. We raised a lot less money. But at the same time, and that was the funny thing, as I mentioned, there were a lot of people interested into joining the club. There were a lot of people, way more than I expected, that kind of, reached out to me and said, well, crisis is happening. I want to kind of piggyback on the crisis and make money and blah, blah, blah. And now it's the time to invest in startups, which I think is the right way of thinking about it. But I didn't know it was so many people were thinking the same way. You've probably heard 1,000 times, like during the 2001 crisis and the 2008, there were great startups that were created, blah, blah, blah. So, which is what I thought, but a lot of people came to me. So in the matter of 2 to 3 months, we doubled the number of investors in the club, which was, I was very happy about. And really the COVID in itself made the mental switch for people like, okay, I want to look for investment in startups online. So that was on the kind of in the investor side. And now that we're out of it, everyone is back to investing, but I have double the size. So I'm super happy that we can write bigger checks and stuff like that. On the startup side, it was actually positive too, because there were a lot of, we're outsiders, right? In Silicon Valley, we're not there, we're French, we're new, we're blah, blah, blah. So some of them really like the fact that we're French because they're thinking, oh, this will allow us to kind of have an access point in Europe and stuff like that. But they also, don't care, like, who are you? What are you doing here? But since there were a lot of American investors, funds, and even syndicates and stuff that stopped investing, it was kind of an opportunity for us to kind of fill the gap. So I actually, there were a bunch of deals that we've done since March that I'm not sure we could have made without COVID, because I think I'm fairly certain we couldn't have done those deals, those great deals, because I mean, if you're the entrepreneur, if you have the choice between a famous Silicon Valley investor and a French group that's just starting, even though we have a great future ahead of us, you're going to choose the first one, obviously. One thing I didn't see is a drop in the valuations. I was expecting it. The last few deals that we made were out of Y Combinator or 500 Startups or Alchemist, which are great incubators in the Valley, and they don't have problems to raise even in the middle of the COVID pandemic. So they kind of held their guns and stayed at their current valuation, which is extremely high, Silicon Valley valuation. I was expecting a drop, it didn't happen, but still we were able to, get in on great deals. So I was quite happy about that.
Well, thank you. Gabriel, we're out of time, but how can people get in touch with you or, find your channel if they speak French? Tell us about how we can follow you more closely.
Absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn. I think it's the easiest way to reach out to me. My profile is in English, obviously, don't worry about it. If you speak French, you can type in Leonis Investment on YouTube. You'll find the channel. I also have an English channel. It's much smaller. I don't publish there that often, but I really want to get back to it. So if you want to subscribe and, push me and comment, come on, videos, blah, blah, blah. I'd be happy to. I guess that's it.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us on what's going on in venture, and have a great day.
Thank you very much for having me.